with continuing fallout from the situation in Parkland, Florida. Obviously, there was a horrific, awful, evil event that occurred last week in Parkland, and that's what dominated the news over the weekend. President Trump is apparently now considering whether he is going to push some gun control measures. One of the reasons he's doing that is because the media have launched an all-out emotional assault on gun control. Here is what CNN, Fox News, MSNBC have been doing. They've been covering all of the students from Parkland. They're high school students, and they're speaking out about gun control. So here are some of the students announcing national demonstrations on gun control.
Today, I'd like to announce that we have an event coming up to have everybody in the nation talking about what we're talking about. And one of the things we've been hearing is that it's not the time yet to talk about gun control. And we respect that. We've lost 17 lives, and our community took 17 bullets to the heart. And it's difficult to come back from that. So here's the time that we're going to talk about gun control. March 24th, we have the March for Our Lives, which you can find at marchforourlives.com, and expect to see us a lot. The March for Our Lives is going to be in every major city, and we are organizing it so students everywhere can beg for our lives. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about the red and blue, the GOP and the Democrats. This is about adults and kids.
Now, whom are you going to beg for your life? You're going to beg Trump for your life, as though Trump could just flip a switch and suddenly these shootings would not happen anymore? There's significant disagreement about the method that should be used in order to militate against these shootings. There's significant and real disagreements on this. Right? I've suggested there ought to be wildly upped security standards at all of these schools, that there ought to be armed guards at virtually every door, that you might consider at some of these schools actually putting into place some doors that can actually close across the campus and lock like they have at hospitals. At many hospitals, they have lockdown procedures where an active shooter's in the hospital, and so you actually lock off certain parts of the hospital from other parts of the hospital so that the shooter can't just walk through the halls with impunity. And there's a lot of disagreement about this. Democrats want, of course, bans on all sorts of weapons, including the AR-15, which is the most popular rifle in the United States. But this idea that it's all about begging, that it's all about if we just cared enough, that all of this would be fine, we just agree on everything, that, of course, is not true in the slightest. This, of course, however, is what the left is suggesting. So the same student, Cameron Kasky, he says you're either with us or against us, which is pretty wild language, considering we are all with you. No one wants to see kids get shot.
You're either with us or against us. We are losing our lives while the adults are playing around. And we have received endless support from your generation, and we thank everybody for that immensely, because we really appreciate it. We don't need you. On March 24th, you are going to be seeing students in every single major city marching, and we have our lives on the line here. And at the end of the day, that is going to be what's bringing us to victory and to making some sort of right out of this tragedy.
I mean, what does victory look like? What does victory look like? That's the real big question. Okay, if victory is no more shootings, then we all agree on the definition of victory. If victory is a piece of gun control legislation that may or may not actually help, then we don't agree on what victory for the country looks like. And you can see that some of these students, obviously, they're very politically motivated. That's okay. I mean, they're allowed to have their political motivations. My problem here is the same problem that I have with the country as a whole. The country as a whole takes being on camera as some sort of imprimatur of knowledge, some sort of imprimatur of expertise, and that's really silly. So LeBron James speaks about politics. That's his right. He's allowed to do it. Some of the stuff he says, I think, is not completely wrong. But why would we treat, as a country, his version of politics with more credibility than people who have studied the issues and studied the personalities for a long time? I don't, and I don't think other people should. Why would we take a bunch of high school juniors and say that these are experts on gun policy now? They're not experts on gun policy simply because their school was targeted. These are people who have experienced significant pain, and obviously we all stand with them and mourn with them in that pain. They have it to a far greater degree, I'm sure, than anybody who's far away. But that does not mean that what they are saying on politics has any more legitimacy or that it has any more expertise to back it. And yet, there's a reason the media does this, right? After the Boston Marathon attacks, did you see victims of the Boston Marathon attacks on TV every day stumping for a travel ban on Muslims? Of course you didn't. After the Orlando shootings, did you see victims of the Orlando shootings who were not left-wing going around and saying, what we need here is a restriction on the number of Muslim immigrants from countries we can't vet? Of course you didn't. Right? The media go out of their way to put people on camera who are sympathetic. This goes all the way back to the Sandy Hook shooting when Piers Morgan was attempting to do this routine, and I called him on it on air. It's highly irritating to me, and it's intellectually dishonest. But there's a reason that all these kids are being put on TV, and to put pressure to... The idea, by the way, that a child shall lead them when it comes to politics is silly. The idea that children are experts on policy because they have greater innocence, no, that means that they don't know enough. There's a reason that you don't let 17-year-olds define tax policy, and you shouldn't let 17-year-olds define gun policy either, depending on whether they've actually studied the issue in any significant way. But again, the media have a real interest in trotting out these kids. Here's another student talking about how Trump sickens the student.
President Trump, you control the House of Representatives, you control the Senate, and you control the executive.
No, he doesn't.
You haven't taken a single bill for mental health care or gun control and passed it. And that's pathetic. We've seen a government shutdown. We've seen tax reform, but nothing to save our children's lives. Are you kidding me? You think now is the time to focus on the past and not the future to prevent the death of thousands of other children? You sicken me.
Trump sickens him. Okay, well, again, Trump does not control the House. He does not control the Senate. I mean, basic civics education would be useful here. These are independent branches of government, and they have to propose and pass legislation. Democrats would filibuster, presumably, a lot of the legislation Republicans would propose. And Republicans are not going to propose legislation that their base doesn't want and that their voters don't want. This is how a republic works. Again, the reason the media are going back to the well here is because they're attempting to create an impetus for action that there is no political impetus for right now. This is aimed at the public. It's not really aimed at Trump or even the legislators. It's aimed at the general public. The suggestion being that if you disagree with these students and if you don't feel their pain in the same way that they do, and by feel their pain we mean agree with them, then that means that you are obviously an uncaring individual. There's another student doing this routine yesterday.
We are going to be the kids that you read about in textbooks. Not because we are going to be another statistic about mass shootings in America, but because, just as David said, we are going to be the last mass shooting.
Okay, but here's the reality. That's probably not true. And none of the gun control, I mean, it's an unfortunate reality. But none of the gun control measures that are currently being proposed by the Democrats would have stopped what happened in Parkland. I've yet to hear a concrete proposal. Have you heard one? I haven't heard any concrete proposal. None. Right? This piece of crap who shot up the school had smoke grenades on him. We still don't know how he got the smoke grenades. Do you think it would have been impossible for him to go through and shoot all these students with a handgun? That's what the student at Virginia Tech used a handgun in that shooting. So blaming the AR-15 is not going to stop these mass shootings. Again, all of this is about generating emotional appeal, not about making a logical appeal. But the real goal here is to get politicians in front of these kids so these people can berate the politicians. So Marco Rubio is falling for this. He's going to go talk to the victims on camera in front of CNN.
It's not our job to tell you, Senator Rubio, how to protect us. The fact that we even have to do this is appalling. Our job is to go to school, learn, and not take a bullet. You need to figure this out. That's why you were unfortunately elected. Your job is to protect us, and our blood is on your hands.
Okay, our blood is on your hands. I mean, only if you think that the government is God and can prevent every single thing, or unless you have a piece of legislation that is backed by evidence and can suggest that there will be no more mass shootings if you pass this piece of legislation. And then we can actually have a conversation. But here's the truth. We know why this shooting took place. We know what failed here. We know what went wrong here. Okay, so what exactly went wrong in Parkland? We know what went wrong at Parkland. Okay, the left insists that the government must have total control over guns in order to stop mass shootings like what happened at Parkland. But we found out that the government won't do that. Okay, we found out the FBI knew full well about the shooter in the Parkland, Florida school massacre and did nothing 2 times. 2. First, they were informed in September that a YouTube user with the shooter's real name said, quote, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." I'm not sure what you need more than that to go and check it out. The FBI didn't even forward it to the field office. They didn't bother to share the information with local authorities. Now the Wall Street Journal reports that in January, a caller told the FBI specifically about the shooter's, quote, gun ownership, desire to kill people, erratic behavior, and disturbing social media posts, as well as the potential of him conducting a school shooting. What happened? Nothing. It was ignored. It was not even forwarded to the field office. So when we talk about the government is big enough to save us, the government's big enough to protect us, there are thousands and thousands of people in this country right now who are felons, who have guns, and the government knows about them and is doing nothing. There are thousands of people who are in the mental health rolls, and they have guns, and the government is doing nothing about them. And you're telling me that a mass gun confiscation is the way that you're going to take care of this? Or that if we have a march in the streets, that somehow this is going to accomplish the end of this? One of the ways that we could actually militate against this, there are 2 ways that I would propose, maybe 3, that would actually, I can actually name, I think, maybe 4 things that we could do that would militate against all of this. So first thing that we could do is the media should stop naming shooters and providing glory to the shooters. When we do this stuff, all we end up doing is promoting this. These are copycat crimes. A huge number of the school shooters are fans of Columbine, have downloaded information about Columbine, become obsessed with school shootings, and want to imitate it so they can get their name in the papers. The media should have an agreement all the way through, and we're going to start implementing this at Daily Wire now. I do it on my show, that we're not going to name the shooter. That is something that I think everyone should work on in the media. That's something that we can do firsthand. Second thing, we should have massive security at the schools. This idiotic notion that there is a school to prison pipeline is not backed by data. That if you have a bunch of armed guards in the schools, then kids are being arrested for silly crimes and then being sent to prison. It's just not true. The data do not support that. We have a whole article by Hank Berrien over at the Daily Wire about this. You can go and check that out. It is not the case. Other things that we can do. The mental health screenings that are already taking place. There needs to be more transparency. All of this information needs to be transmitted to local law authorities. It all needs to be put in the databases. People need to be fired or lose their jobs or lose their careers if they do not enter information that is relevant. And then something terrible happens. Because I promise you, for every school shooting that happens like this where the FBI missed it, there are 100 other instances where the FBI missed it, but there was no school shooting. If this happened once, this happened 100 times. We've now had the FBI and the CIA miss things in the San Bernardino shooting, in the Texas shooting, in this shooting, in the Charleston shooting. The government is not doing what they already have the power to do. So that's something that we certainly should be taking a look at. So those are three things right off the bat that we should be looking at. David French has a proposal over at National Review that is called a gun violence restraining order. And what he suggests, I want to find the actual verbiage. So he says that what we should do here is we should have GRVOs. He says there are various versions of these laws working their way through the states. California passed a GRVO statute in 2014, and it went into effect in 2016. Broadly speaking, they permit a spouse, parent, sibling, or person living with a troubled individual to petition a court for an order enabling law enforcement to temporarily take an individual's gun rights away. A well-crafted GVRO should contain the following elements. Quote, it should limit those who have standing to seek the order to a narrowly defined class of people, like close relatives, people living with the respondent. It should require petitioners to come forward with clear, convincing, admissible evidence the respondent is a significant danger to himself or others. It should grant the respondent an opportunity to contest the claims against him. In the event of an emergency, an ex parte order, an order granted before a respondent can contest, should be scheduled a full hearing should be scheduled quickly if there's an ex parte order. And the order should lapse after a defined period of time unless petitioners can come forward with clear and convincing evidence that it should remain in place. So this would be something that we could all agree on across the board. These seem like reasonable gun control measures to me. And they're not just gun control measures, they're societal control measures in the sense that they are restrictions we place on ourselves in order to try and tamp down the possibility of violence here. Unfortunately, we're not going to have real conversations about all of this. We're just going to shout